I don't know, what's the topic for you?
And what are we gonna use I thought instead of using that for the amount, we can talk about the loss on deeds.
Good evening. We'll start the Common Council Finance and Human Resource Committee meeting, March 28th. Call to order. Common Council Member Katie Lepage-Shu.
Here.
Council Member Scott Harrington.
Here.
Council Member John Rafter.
Here.
Any changes, corrections, or modifications to the March 7th minutes that were provided electronically? Hearing none, we'll accept them. Topic A.
Okay, so this is to make a modification to the part-time wage scale to include engineering technician. We have a full-time engineering technician position that's in our, that has been in our adopted titles for a while. It just hasn't been added to the part-time wage scale. So this would be to add someone who would essentially act as a construction inspection, construction observer for West Street construction project and some others at a range of $20 to $30 per hour depending on experience. So we would be added to the part-time wage scale at $20 to $30 per hour. We have somebody who we'd like to hire at this point, and yeah, that's basically it.
Staying within the budget.
Within the budget.
Any other questions?
How many hours do you expect them to work?
During construction, they're basically full-time. It's a seasonal position, 40 hours a week, working along with the contract.
And you say you already have this budgeted?
Yes. Yeah, this is just formalizing the position and the pay rate on our wage scale.
Basically, we need them from like April to October, November.
Okay, I have a very green question. How is this a part-time position if they're gonna work full-time?
Because it's not permanent, it's not year-round. They're seasonal,
Okay.
essentially, working full-time hours, but it's not a full-time position.
No.
I don't know, Ginny, if you have a better explanation than that, but that's...
Yes,
Section.
it's the definition of seasonal. I'm sure Katie could explain it much better than myself, but seasonal depends on when the work is available. And also there is a time period, it's 12 weeks to 16 weeks, something like that. But I can confirm that with Katie as far as how many weeks is considered seasonal.
Gotcha. So we're adding the seasonal position to the part-time pay scale.
Well,
It's still considered, it's all part-time pay scale.
yeah,
Okay.
all of the titles on the part-time pay scale can be applied to seasonal workers or part-time workers.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. No, that's okay. I mean, I know you guys know what you're doing. I just wanted to make it make sense to me. So thank you.
Any consensus?
Mm-hmm.
With that, I know, full council. Topic B, water treatment plant pickup truck.
This is a budgeted purchase that we are prepared to move forward with. We did a bid. There was only one bid received. It was for $41,682.52. Budgeted $45,000 with some additional work in service to be done at Central Garage. The total cost will be just under $45,000, we believe. It replaces the existing water treatment plant pickup truck. They use this truck to get around town to take samples every day, to go up to the watershed and to different water tanks and to tell a well. This is basically getting around town to do their work. It's shared amongst the 5 staff. The existing truck is 2012. It's badly rusted. It's something that's been...
Is that that little white one?
Yeah.
Looks like a box that's ready to fall out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be the...
Any other questions?
No.
Hearing none, we'll move that up to full council. Topic C.
Topic C, so we, you may remember the Future for Oneon Foundation had committed $50,000 toward a project to pave some pathways in Newar Park. They, I think, just couldn't come to a council meeting back last this is one of the projects that's on our list, prioritized list of ARPA funded projects. With that first tranche of ARPA money, it's $13,000 total. The total estimate for this project right now is $150,000. We'll have a better idea, it might be more than that. Price increases and whatnot going on in the asphalt industry are certainly going to affect that. But that's something we'll hope to bid by the end of April, maybe into the first part of May. Engineering department is working on that now. I don't know, Chris, if you have anything else to add on.
Basically, the draft drawings are completed. We're working on specifications, and we're hoping to go to bid soon.
So that's just something where we'd like to move forward with formally accepting a donation from the Future from the Foundation. They had come in and talked about that. I think they passed a resolution at their board meeting in support of that, but it's something that we would need to accept.
Right, so for tonight's purposes, we're just talking about the donation, nothing else.
Yeah.
Do you know if they've already raised the funds?
My understanding was they were going to use those, pay for it with their reserve funds initially, but they thought that they were going to
Gotcha.
raise those funds back
Okay.
over lunchtime. I'm not sure where that might stand. That's something we can ask them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have no problem, obviously, taking a donation. I think it's really generous of them. I was just curious. Thanks. Because that's really fast, right? Like, when it falls in now, that's like $60,000.
Yeah, I believe they intended to use some existing funds there.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions or concerns?
None.
Topic D.
Okay, so I believe there is an attachment to this one. Is everyone fine with ARPA spending plan? So we did. So we had presented this back in the fall during budget time, and also had essentially agreed on a prioritized list of parks improvement projects. We talked about how there would be some changes to the estimates. Obviously, they were preliminary estimates at that time. Basically, what you see in front of you, 1 through 8, was presented at that time. Number 9 is a new one we'll talk about in just a sec. What I included is there's a column 2021 estimated ARPA amount original. That's what was presented back last fall. And the next column over is what we're presenting now. So current best estimates for each of these projects. Number 1, the Nilo Park Electric Infrastructure Improvements Phase 2. That's gone from 40 to 90, not just because of price increases, that's a factor, but initially we were thinking that as an in-house DPW, possibly with some help from Job Corps project like we did with Phase 1, but getting into the design of it is just a little bit too big of a project to take on in-house, so we needed to contract that out. So that's why that, based on the bid that we awarded at the last council meeting, plus a little bit of contingency, is budgeted at $90,000. So obviously, when you have a fixed amount, $713,000 available, that means something else has to be reduced. And as we had discussed last fall, the number 8, Nilo Park Main Drive Sidewalk, based on some of these changes, is just, that's sort of acting as our contingency at this point. And that was our intent. We were hoping to get through these projects and see how much we have left over for the sidewalk improvements, with everything else being a higher priority. And so you see that's been reduced from $175,000 to, at this point, $53,000. If I'm honest, I don't think we're going to be using much of this ARPA money on sidewalks, if any, by the time we're done with these projects, given price increases and the fact that we have some uncertainty with the scope. These estimates are all preliminary except for that first one at this point. So the next line is the project we just talked about, paved pathways, showing 100,000 coming from ARPA funds and 50 from FOF. Nilo Park performance stage that has not yet been designed. Later this fall, most likely, we would like to do an RFQ, hire architects to work with us, as well as some community members. I think this is something that might warrant a small task force of people who are involved in performances to advise exactly what we want to build. develop that with an architect and then go out to bid. So that $235,000, that's based on adjusted for inflation estimate done by LA Group almost a decade ago. It's been increased, but we really don't know the exact scope at this point. So there's a caveat that scope of work is to be determined, so the price could certainly change accordingly. But that would be to install a permanent performance stage, essentially in the same location where the bandstand goes now, or possibly
So you won't start design until later this year, Q4?
at the earliest. Yeah, I think we would try to, by the end of this year, have someone on board. With the intent to possibly construct something in 2020.
So we can't actually stay within the 235. What's the backup plan?
Continue to borrow, take from other lower priority projects on this list, unless we find some other, of course, with any of these projects that aren't yet done, if we find another source of funding, a grant that's worth going after, we would prioritize that so we can, get the most bang for our buck. But at this point, we don't have any surefire, grant opportunities that we're aware of. Wilbur Lake Trail Bridge replacement, that's what used to be Upper Cross Road, now it's a pedestrian bike trail. The bridge has been out for several years, a number of years now. Initially, we showed that as $28,000. We had mentioned the idea of possibly splitting that cost, 2/3 to 1/3 maybe with the town. The town's indicated they don't think they're going to be able to provide any sort of cash match to that project. Our reasoning being that it's obviously in the town going on, even though it's on city property. Certainly more than just city people, residents use that. But they did offer to provide in-kind services with their town highway department if that's applicable. So yet to be designed, something that, Chris's group is going to look at probably this fall by the time we get through some other projects that are higher up the list and possibly implement that next year. Basketball court number 1, we call it number 1, that's what it's called on the plans. It's the basketball court in the Delaware Park in the center, closest to the playground. That's the older one. We would look to relocate that, put a new one next to the other newer basketball court of the large community. Skate park rehabilitation. Scope of work to be determined, this would be for improving or repairing and restoring any deterioration that's there now. It's not really looking at a bigger project to add or expand or significantly change at that dollar amount. But it's certainly something we'd want to bring in some sort of a skate park expert or someone who's dealt with designing these before to look at with us and advise what might be done. And then the Walk Park playground improvements, that's to add some shade structures, I think ADA accessible equipment, possibly some other new equipment as well. But again, exact scope to be determined. But the main focus of that was shade structure and ADA improvements. And then that brings us, if I skip over the New Walk Park sidewalk, which as I told you is more of a contingency line at this point for the other projects. We'd like to add New Walk Park Baseball Field 6, which is the nice baseball field that's not domestic, the other one that's completely fenced in next to the skate park. That infield needs to be restored, basically rebuilt at the same scope of work as what we had added on to the Damascus Field construction project a couple years ago. We redid that infield. The lip along the edge of the dirt and the grass is really way too big. It's not a great playing surface at this point.
Basically going in about 4 foot on either side of the infield areas and replacing that dirt to get rid of the lips.
So it's an existing asset. It's obviously an expensive maintenance item, something that a contractor needs to be brought in to do. We've got a quote. I believe it was within that 50,000.
Yeah, it was 40 and change.
So we've gotten some complaints from some of the users who are paying users. It's the field we rent. Who deals with various users. Cooperstown Baseball World's a big user. I think some of the high school teams.
Leatherstocking
Baseball Club.
Yeah, about just between Cooperstown Baseball World and Leatherstocking, it's about $5,700 a year we get from them.
Yeah, so just looking at those two users, there's others, but just those two alone, that's less than a 10-year payback as far as $50,000 versus $5,700 a year. So it's a facility that we'd like to maintain as a premium facility that we rent. And we certainly wouldn't want to lose those
And we've been receiving complaints from them specifically about the field condition.
I'm not sure the year that was installed is early 2000s, early this century, and we would probably expect 10, about this time frame, 10 to 20 years maximum, depending on the use and the wear and tear before it needs to be done again. So I think we certainly got our life out of it.
I'm trying to remember if the lights on how long.
There are no.
Any questions?
No.
I have some thoughts on it, but I can wait. I just, I think that was, hearing from users that it needs to be replaced, is very helpful, and I think, hearing that the life of this repair is about 10 years, and that's about as long as it takes to pay it back, is helpful also. I wouldn't be inclined to support this only because I had asked the council, as I understood the plan, right, and you had confirmed it today, we're sort of borrowing from each lower priority as needed in order to fund what we deem the higher priorities. We were presented this list in the budget. I had asked the council to consider that if we did not have enough funding to fund our number 9 priority, that we'd take a look at funding public art. The rate of return on public art is significantly greater than $5,700. And right now it's a commission that we've established, and we're sort of just expecting them to pull miracles out of thin air. So I think that it would really behoove us to take this opportunity to fund their master plan, which is forthcoming in the next month or so. At least begin to fund it to get a public access in the community. I'm obviously, I love the parks. I will champion the parks every chance I get. But the parks are going to come out of this ARPA spending really, really well upgraded and really beautiful. And so I would just advocate for us to consider what flexibility we have with that lowest funding amount to be able to fund art in our community.
Can I take on the back of it for a minute? When we were talking about this funding in the budget, I remember Gary sitting there and saying that, they got together, they came up with a list, but it's also a list that we could change. So,
This list, you mean the ARPA?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was put in. So, there are some other things I think we need to look at that might be beneficial to the city. And, one of the big ideas, when we sat down there freezing during the winter earlier, was a splash park, which would really make the city, sell the city, help bring, especially if we want to start getting people to move into the city. I think that's some ideas that we really have to start looking at as well. I'm not big on number 4, the trail bridge replacement. I think the town needs to help out a little bit. And I understand they're giving DPW, but I'm not really sure that that's in the scope of things going to be a substantial help to that. So I just think maybe we need to sit down, kind of maybe even as a council, and see where thought the king was walking into me. But maybe just see where, maybe more as a council, where we want to spend more of our ARPA spending plan money. And have more of a say than what we did the last time, because it was just given to us in a budget process. And said, here you go. This is what the mayor and a couple other people sat down and wanted do, and I felt that that got taken out of the council's hands.
I think too, if I can just tag on to that, I think part of the reason why we were sort of shepherded into approving this was, one of the things that we heard was that it's to replace lost tourism revenue and we're gonna spend it on the parks, and that's good, we can all get behind that, and I think that we all do. But that we needed to make a decision right then because we had to report what we were gonna spend our ARPA on, and so it needed to be like a broader topic. So I agree, Scott, I think it'd be great, especially because the funding, the cost estimates are changing so greatly as we go along. I think maintaining flexibility as we go through this from priority to priority would be great.
Craig, did you want to respond?
I mean, certainly the council, it's up to the council ultimately. We're coming back one project at a time to approve these before we award contracts and go forward with them. And if there are going to be any changes made, the sooner they're made, the better. We do have to commit to what we're spending this money on by the end of 2024. We have time. Certainly when we asked, our recommendation of spending money on parks projects, because those rarely have any funding sources for them. We've had a Sidewalk Park Master Plan, last update in 2013 with one project done. Since then, I think was two projects, the Mansky Field project and basketball court. A lot of these are improving existing assets, certainly the infield restoration of Field 6. I understand Field 6. Do we just let it go, and whether we get renters or not, we do the best we can with it, and it degrades in quality and is no longer, is it something we don't want to put as much money into it as we have been, and let it drop to a lower level of service and treat it like another softball field? The way we maintain those is a little bit different, with less care put into it. Or do we want to continue to maintain it? Because it is a maintenance item, consistent expense maintenance item. It's not really adding anything to it. It's just keeping it at the current quality.
Yeah.
I guess I never really asked this question. I'm looking at $235,000 for a bandstand. How often does our bandstand get used? What's the rate of return on it? Is it 235 like a Cadillac, or is it, you know what I'm saying? Is it something that we could start with and then we could budget out? And I guess I just don't understand 235 for a bandstand. I guess I can't visualize what we're looking at.
Let me just interject here. Tonight, what we're doing is we're discussing the addition of number 9 on this list by city staff. I think for tonight's discussion, what we can do is just take it and move it up to full council, and city staff can make an explanation of the use of the funds. And then council has opportunity now to look at this list until next Tuesday, to look at it, chew on it, make thoughts about it each way, all the way around, and go from there. Because ultimately, we, the finance committee, are not going to be able to change how the funding is going to go out on each one of these line items. It's going to be a council decision. So for tonight's purposes, why don't we just look at whether
We're okay on the finance committee, Lynn, to pass it up, and that's what we're discussing now. I think you're completely wrong. That's why we're discussing.
Do you think that
this
I'm
now.
wrong, that we're going to have the ability to decide where the money's going to be spent?
No, what I'm saying is this is where we discuss this, and then we pass it up to the council.
Right. So
all I'm saying is they want to add number 9 on. Well, maybe to add number 9 on, maybe we have to say, well, we don't like that they're taking it out of this lower funding, maybe we want it out of the upper funding. That's what some of these questions are, is like with the bandstand, is 235 really the appropriate amount for that, or should we take that money out and move it along into number 9 like they're asking for?
I'm
That's
not
what we're doing.
discounting what you're saying. I'm saying the city staff have come to us now with this plan, and whether you agree with it or disagree with it, the chart has been made, and now,
And if we say no here in this committee, then it doesn't go up to the council. It stops in this committee.
the council approved this budget with 8 out of the 9 items.
I know that, but I'm just saying,
So their
if
voice
we said no, we
is already
didn't want to
heard
do
on that.
this.
So,
If we didn't want to do this in our committee, it would stop here in this committee and it'd have to come back.
think Scott's right.
That's how committee structure works, Lana. It hasn't changed from the county to here. It's the same.
Otherwise, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, why do we have committees? If then everything should just come as a committee as a whole into the council.
Okay.
Yep, I'm gonna vote that we don't move it up.
Is that how you're gonna vote?
Second.
Okay. John? Move it up or don't move it up? You're looking at a chart.
Hmm,
You're looking at a chart.
yeah,
Do you wanna move it up or not?
I don't know, I'm abstaining.
So abstain was gonna act like a no, so I was gonna say move it on up for the full council to have a full discussion about it. The city staff can make their presentation of how the funds are gonna be expended, but if you wanna keep it down here sequestered, it'll be there sequestered. This item is now tabled until the next meeting.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is there something that we should be bringing, preparing for the next meeting to further the discussion? Or should we?
Yeah, I was just asking about the bandstand, rate of returns on things. Is this the appropriate place to be putting all this money, or would it be better if we pulled it out, a little bit out of there and moved it back down? Specific stuff.
So the specific would be, well, when you mentioned rate of return, I'm not sure what rate of return on a bandstand would be.
Well, how much does it get used is really what I'm asking. Like,
That's-
that's what I'm
There's-
literally asking.
But there's non-monetary value too, right? Because when we
Right.
when we rent
But
it
that's not a
out,
rate of
people
return.
come
Right.
and they listen and maybe they, you know, go out to eat downtown or whatever, and that kind of thing can't really be measured by that, but we do like grant, like permits for it, that's the thing. Like in the way that we're like, okay, we make $5,700 a year from these users on Field 6, we can do that with the
I think it would
bandstand
be rate
too.
of return. How much is it used?
Yeah, I know,
Great.
it's misused.
Jenny, you have something to add?
Could I ask a question to the committee?
Yes, please.
The ARPA discussion, I understand the difference of opinions, and it may warrant an actual special council committee meeting to discuss the ARPA budget. However, the answer for Greg and Chris is how are we going to fund the necessary repairs to Field 6? So do we bring that back to the next finance committee meeting, or do we move it up the council agenda with, I can look at different funding sources if you don't want to go to ARPA. It will probably come from one of the reserves or something like that. But I think, in my opinion, that Chris and Greg need guidance on how to move forward on the maintenance of the field.
Yeah.
So
That'd
how
have
would
to
you
go
like
back to the next council. That'd have to come back to the committee because we just said we weren't gonna deal with this.
Dave?
Sorry, I know I'm not on the committee, but I do have a question. Did we as a council approve what was located in 1 through 8? Did we approve that dollar amount? We did. So it's not really appropriate, in my opinion, to bring that back to a committee for a discussion to rehash out a discussion or a decision that's already been made by the full council.
So you're concurring with what I just said? Because that's
Exactly
what I just said.
Exactly. It seems like the discussion was really about number 9.
I knew this would happen. I knew this would happen. It's the thing that drives me crazy about being on council, is that we are rushed into a decision, promise that, oh, we need to make a decision on a generality because of this timeline, and we can get down into the specifics later, and then we never get that opportunity.
And Dave, I'm gonna disagree with you again, is we're talking about number 9. Number 9 failed to go up because that was something that they added, which was not one of the originals. They're already starting to sit there with the budget, if you're gonna use the argument that this is what was budgeted, and they're already playing with numbers from what was put in the budget, and they've increased them in other areas and decreased them in other areas where they felt that they had to take the money out to complete other projects. So, that's what they did there, like in 2021, it was estimated at 28, was at 28, now they're coming back to us with, say, 50. So, we're talking about the same thing. They're playing with the numbers, we're playing with the numbers, so why can't we have a discussion and say, hey, council, well, we know we sat there and said, hey, 235 might have been you're appropriate there, but we really want to get this baseball field done because of X, Y, and Z. So let's take that out of there versus taking some of these lower priorities and not even get a chance to get to those.
I think, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with these guys. I think as long as the number 1 through 8 is not removed completely by the committee without a full council discussion, since that was already decided on. If numbers need to be tweaked, tweak them, but then it should go back to the full council with a full explanation of why you're trying to tweak the numbers. I would disagree with removing something just to remove it, to put something else in there instead, and then moving that forward and saying, hey, let's approve this.
Right.
And we also need to acknowledge that we now have received a $50,000 donation, which again, that's what this chart does.
Right.
It recognizes that cost expenditure. Now we have a new revenue source towards that cost expenditure. Again, it's just the council as a whole agreeing to the concepts of 1 through 8, now 9, as Scott said, has been introduced, which could be removed at full council, or
No, 9 could be removed.
No,
here.
mine can be removed here
That's the
because
point
that
of
wasn't
bringing
part
it
of
to
it.
this committee, because it wasn't approved by the full council. What Dave is saying is, these things that have already been approved would need to go back to the full council, and I agree with that completely.
and that's what I said originally. That's what's on this chart. He's just reiterating what I just said to you. He's over there acknowledging his head, going up and down. If you don't want 9 on it, then make a friendly amendment and say, hey, I don't want to see 9 on there.
No, we don't, the motion is to approve 9. The motion is not to approve
Yeah.
the chart.
Add.
The chart has been rearranged by city staff for funding of 1 through 8. Are you agreeing with that or not agreeing with that? And that's where you went off and said, no, I want to have a discussion about it. You want to have the control of where the numbers go now at this committee level. If that's the case, then what are the new numbers from your perspective?
That's what I'm trying to ask questions about, like with the bandstand and stuff like this. Because then this committee can go and make the recommendation of, we need to adjust the numbers in this particular area for this particular reason.
So that's that was the question that Greg asked you. What information do you need from city staff to make those educated decisions?
That's what I said, well, how often does our bandstand get used?
I don't know how you're going to quantify that.
So, I guess just to clarify, maybe it's clear, I just want to make sure it's clear, is when we asked the council to approve this list, it was really asking for approval that parks projects were a priority, and specifically these parks projects were something we wanted to go after completely. With the understanding, as I explained at the time, that we didn't know the exact costs, and the costs were going to change, and we would come back project by project and make sure that we're in agreement on that. So, to answer your question, Scott, I can't answer your question right now, whether a $235,000 investment is an amazing bandstand or a basic bandstand, because I just don't know. That's something we'd have to determine, I think, with architects and with input from the community as to what we really want. I can look up statistics from Lou, how many bands play at the summer concert series down there, and we can kind of get some information on that. But it's not, those fees are not significant. I think the quantifying the benefit to the community is something that I can't provide. That's more of a...
You have to sit there and count the numbers of how many people show up to a performance and keep a historical perspective of it. I don't know if anybody's ever done that before. So, I don't know how else, and I like your point about, does that flow over into Main Street and Market Street, into retail spaces?
And,
I have no idea how we're going to quantify any of that.
yeah.
I don't know who keeps track
I
of
mean,
it.
certainly 2% baseball world has an effect on hotels and that sort of thing. That you can make that argument about a lot of the parks amenities that draw people in for one reason or another. We took our cue in creating this list. We thought parks priorities in general, because you can't get funding for those. We can't do them otherwise. They've been sitting there dormant on our list. But we took our cue from the master plan, which was done with significant community input led by an architecture firm that specializes in this sort of thing. Yes, it was almost a decade ago. But at that time, these were considered priorities, so we wanted to kind of just try to move some of those forward. Of course, those can be changed.
And just to add to that, we also looked at projects COVID-related for providing outdoor activities for pandemic situations for those people that would be able to go somewhere that had more safety in being able to find some type of entertainment. So that's why the parks projects also fell right under all of those guidelines that were in the ARPA final rule. And one of it was providing outdoor activities, especially for the low-income residents who did not have the opportunity to go somewhere else, and it would be a safe place for them in the parks development.
Yeah, I think if I can speak for the group, right, we're not necessarily reconsidering
The list.
the overall scope of the list, just what's, and I don't even know if we're doing that. I think we're just trying to figure out the funding, which changes so drastically.
Well, let me put it back to the committee of, do you want to fund from the ARPA fund the addition of field number 6?
No. I understand though that we do need to figure out how to fund it, so sorry to make that complicated. But I think art is just like parks in that it's always going to be the last thing cut. And so if we have this opportunity to get this program off the ground, I think that we should take it.
If you don't mind, I just want to add one thing. In my tenure here, we have never funded any type of art project. I need to educate myself on what we can legally do for the Arts Commission as far as what the city is able to spend funds on. So I will get that information together and give it to you,
Okay.
just so you've got a guideline. And I will also provide it to Greg.
I appreciate that, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot, obviously, about municipal funding that's complicated.
So good. For me, I would rather see us try to fund that work that needs to be done, some results. And if you can't do it, then I guess come back and we'll have that discussion again. But if you could maybe find some other way of cleaning out field number 6 so that it's pleasable to our 2 tenants, I think that would be more attributable so that we can keep that 50,000 within the ARPA funds moving forward through 23 to 26.
Yeah, I think there's going to be 2 sources, either unrestricted general fund or
The repair reserve.
repair reserve.
The repair reserve that we have set up is for repairs that are not often done. Is a very simple explanation of what you can use the repairs. As Greg said, this is done every 10 to 20 years, so I can verify that this is a valid expenditure for that. And so if you agree to that, that Greg and I will define a funding source, and then we can bring it for council approval next time. That way, Greg and Chris will be able to move on with their plans.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I would like to see, though, that this table be moved up to full council, so the full council understands that you're now looking at expenditure within those lines differently than when the budget was created. So that we're all on the same page.
Table 1 through 8.
Yeah, table 1 through 8, they're now getting costs that are different than what was projected to us back in 21. And that gets everybody up onto the same page. But for tonight's purposes, John, I'm voting no to not approve the additional funds. I don't know if you want to go on record for how you want to vote.
So what are you proposing, what are you voting on?
On topic D, subsection 1, 3 of us have said not to approve
No,
funding
I
it through
agree to
ARPA.
not approve that at this point.
But we would
And
like
I would
to-
agree with you, Lynn, about 1 through 8 going up so the council has.
An idea of-
It's an updated chart, right? It's an updated chart. I think full council should see an updated chart.
Yeah, so that's just like FYI.
Correct. So that we're all on the same page.
Cool.
Is that a council discussion item, as opposed to, I mean, the council received this email with the table,
Oh,
but I
that's
can
right.
resend the email without number 9, which would add 2,000 back into the
Correct.
sidewalk.
Okay.
I can just do that, unless you think there's discussion to be had.
I don't think there's a discussion we had. I just want to have all of us on the same.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Maybe we need to have a discussion about ARPA funds in general at the council level.
Is that something that you want to raise on your own, or do you want city administrator to raise it?
It can be brought up off the floor, but I just figured if it was on for the agenda, to have a discussion about our, the whole fund and
Now would be a good time to have it.
okay,
So you'll take the lead?
sure.
Okay, topic E. With subsections 1 and 2 and
Okay, we just wanted to give you a brief update on our Market Street projects, which are have a variety of funding sources and considerations. The number one, Transit Parking Garage Streetscape project, where we have an RFQ that's ready to go out right now, it's being reviewed by DOT. As soon as the review's done, it's ready to go. We'll put that out for an engineering architecture firm or team to do detailed design, prepare construction documents, really take us through into and through construction for that Transit Hub Parking Garage projects. Option number one, as it was in the conceptual report, which is within the parking garage, the bus bays out front, Transit Hub built within the garage. Garage repairs and improvements as well. Included in that scope of work will be the streetscape improvements for Market Street from Main at least down to just past the parking garage, possibly further, most likely just that section. And then there's also one of the DRI projects was called the Water Street Boardwalk improvements. There might not actually be a boardwalk created, but that was essentially improving pedestrian connectivity between Market Street and Main Street along Water Street extension. And then there's also another plaza passageway improvements, another DRI funded project that is that sidewalk that goes around the Key Bank building, up to Mother Plaza from Water Street. So making improvements along there, obviously we need to have access through that gate, some modifications there, but that's all going to be included in this one scope of work because it's all interconnected. So that's something we'll be moving forward with. We'd expect, ideally, we'll have design completed and going to bid for construction by this time next year, probably a little bit sooner, probably early 2023. That would be our goal. So cool. That's all I had for number one there. But 27 Market Street, that's where we have a updated cost estimate from Delaware Engineering. They've been working on this project. Hold on to your seats. It's currently estimated to cost $1.728 million to demolish and prepare that site for future development. By prepare the site for future development, I mean the entire foundation will be removed. It will be a blank slate for whatever a developer someday may want to do with it, or the city will decide to do something with their sites. That's including soft costs, engineering, construction observation. The reasons for the increase, so I guess a little history. Yeah, Seago now, they had originally received an ESD grant for $477,000. I think, I'm not sure the year on that, but that was about 5 years ago, I believe. That was transferred to the city. That cost estimate that they used for that grant was based on numbers from 5 or 6 years ago. It was also based on a limited understanding of the scope of work. They had not done detailed structural evaluations or investigations, and at that time didn't understand that Chestnut Street Extension essentially is partially supported by the foundation wall of 27 Market Street. So in order to take 27 Market Street down, we have to install some sort of retaining wall system that's not there now. So that's part of the added cost there. That's a significant portion of it. And obviously, recent price increases don't help anything. So that's something we still would like to move forward with, assuming the council considers that a priority. Delaware Engineering, I'm not sure, Chris, if you could speak to how close they are to having some plans, probably a month or so away.
We met with them last week, and they had very preliminary plans. They're moving forward with their design. I'm hoping to get, continual contact with Alex there, and I'd say hopefully by the end of this, next month, we'll have some final plans, end of April.
So, obviously, we would need to identify additional funding sources. What we've looked at, we did receive $257,500 from the sale of the D Street lot. That's something that the council might consider, if that's just part of our general fund balance at this point. But given that was, a sale of a city property, we're looking to improve other city property, it might be something you want to consider. We haven't anticipated $713,000, our second $713,000, our 2022 ARPA funds that we would receive, that we have not yet discussed in any detail with the council as to how to prioritize the spending of that. That's something that we could use for this. That's $713,000. And then, of course, if there were a developer who were to buy this parcel from the city, that would recoup whatever we sell it for, whatever that may be. That's an unknown at this point. We don't have any agreement in place. We paid $431,000 for it. I don't believe we'll necessarily get that.
That's my goal.
That's your goal.
My goal is to get that money back.
I think our goal should be 1.728.
No, but I mean, to get the 431 back that we spent, that's what I would do.
I think it's important to keep in mind, obviously it's a big price tag, and but it's important to keep in mind that we don't believe that there's much potential or interest from any developers in taking on this site as it is. Certainly we haven't received that interest to date. So I'm looking at this as an investment. If you talk about a public-private partnership, this is our public investment. It's not privately owned yet. We don't have any partnership in place, but this is hopefully setting us up for private developers to be more interested in the site.
But is this number representative of paying prevailing rate, which has at least a 40% increase on a project, give or take?
Yes. I'm not sure,
So-
40%.
I think the original estimate didn't include sheet pile either, did it?
Right.
Sheet pile's expensive.
It also didn't include the asbestos removal, correct?
Say that again?
I don't think it included the asbestos removal.
Not to the level that
No.
they are gonna have to do.
There was environmental remediation assumed in it, but now they know more, so it's more expensive than what was anticipated.
Is a detailed, just for, I think we're all sort of wanting to know more about the investment that we're making in this property, is a detailed, description of what this cost estimate entails gonna be included in the plan from Delaware Engineering? Do you know?
Yeah, we have that now. I mean, as far as line items, demolition,
Yeah.
sheet piling, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Foundation removal, is that what you mean?
Yep. Yeah, just in terms of knowing, what we had thought, for example, the asbestos remediation might be what they estimated to be now, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a line item, script or estimate from the original grant application.
Oh, okay.
The city didn't make that application, it was, I see it now,
Oh, okay.
5 or 6 years ago, so I don't think I have that, but we have a current line item, we just received this afternoon, updated.
Oh, cool. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I like. Thanks.
Is that something you can share with more time?
Can I just ask for, we talked about a couple of funding sources that are concrete, that exist, and then a couple of options. Can you just run down those again, so I can write them down?
Yeah, so we currently have, the original grant amount received was $477,000. When I say receive, that's a reimbursement.
Yeah, it's 477,915. That's the Restore New York grant.
Okay,
Otsego now is doing a match to that grant of $53,102.
okay.
So we have $531 017 committed to the project. Greg, did you want to talk about the CFA application yet?
Yeah, just a sec, actually, just to clarify, we've spent some of that 477 so far, the work that Delaware Engineering's done. I think we spent about 25,000 on the SHPO report, and I don't know, but I think it's somewhere around 70
I think it's around
for the design.
Okay.
The other source I mentioned, the sale of the D slot, which essentially is general fund unrestricted fund balance at this point. Since we already have that, that was 257,500.
Okay.
ARPA,
Mhm.
713.
potential sale of the property.
For the amount to be determined.
Okay.
And then, Judy, you want to talk about the CFA?
Yeah, so there's currently a CFA portal open, which means it's an online application. It's open until April 15th for ESD funding for municipality. It's for businesses and municipalities and nonprofits and stuff, but it's basically a community development type of and business investment type of projects or grant. And one of the things that they fund is demolition and site restoration. That's one of the items. So I've been working on the application through, that's due April 15th. It will fund up to 20% of the project costs that will not have been spent before we get an award letter, if we get an award. And if I can get it in, well, I have to get it in by April 15th because the portal closes and they don't know when they're gonna reopen it for next round. But their tentative dates for an award letter for anything they award is June or July. So I don't know the exact dollar amount, I still have to figure that out, what we think won't be spent before June or July. And then I'll ask for 20% of whatever is unspent. So I'm thinking we're gonna be in the $200,000 range somewhere, two to 300 max. But if we get that, then that can go for this as well. And that's through the same funding agency, Empire State Development, as our Restore New York grant, but it's a different program.
230,000.
200 to 300, somewhere in there is what we're gonna ask for. I don't know.
We need 230,000.
I have to do the math.
Well, we only have 1.5.
And, you know, we may have to get everything ready, even get out to bid and make the construction dates contingent on the award letter for this funding. I mean, I don't know. We may have to hold up the project till June or July to get the max amount. Because I'd like to go for the 20% of the full construction amount. Yeah, so we'll see.
Is there a maximum for the application?
I can only ask for, no, I can ask for up to 20%.
So, talk about the funding, the potential sources for funding. Aside from this grant, we have the deeds lot, which I know, all I want to do is bring to the table the things like we did with the last ARPA conversation. The things that we're sort of putting aside, right? So we have the parking reserve, funding the parking study with the deeds lot sale money. And then also the $713,000 was the second half of the ARPA. We had talked about funding the water main underneath River Street. So that is a huge project that will also need funding. So I think just in order for us to make the best decision and get the full picture is helpful. I mean, I think, sorry, for me, I was just gonna say that, you know, I think that looking into parking and having a parking reserve, that all sounded really great and like a smart use of that money, but I think that it's not something to go into debt for. So I would approve, I mean, I would be confident using that funding for this, if that's possible. The water main is a big project, so that, you know, it's one or the other. But we have to do both, so.
Yeah, to clarify on the River Street project, I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. I think there are other opportunities. I mean, we would be bonding for that anyway, even with this 713. We're also still waiting to hear from the state, depending on what budget is passed. There's been a proposal to include the state touring route funding, which we got last year of $700-something thousand, which we had never received before. I had no idea we were getting it. That was nice.
Cool.
There's talk of that being included again, so whether it's at that same funding level or some other degree is yet to be determined. And also there's talk about increasing the CHIPS funding, which is the regular state funding we get based on our living knowledge of roads. So that can help us with other street projects, whether First Street or otherwise. So there are other sources for that. And with parking, if we're gonna do some sort of paid parking, you know, that obviously is gonna bring in some revenue. So those, any sort of a study or initial implementation hopefully would be offset, and then you'd see a revenue build over time from that. Would you have something else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, we're hearing that some of the federal infrastructure money for water and sewer, some of that's gonna come down to the DW, or a lot is gonna come down into the DRS, or DWSRF, and then, drinking water state revolving funds, and the clean water state revolving funds at the state level. But there's also talk about, allocations directly to communities for water and sewer infrastructure. So if that happens, things like that could be funded.
Great.
Good.
Yeah, nice to recap quick. Our direction, I haven't heard any direction from this committee to not proceed with the projects. Obviously, that's not what we're looking for. So I think what we'll do, we'll continue on, Delaware's going to finish their work to prepare the construction plans and get ready to bid. In the meantime, Judy's going to continue with her grant application. We'll have to bring that motion to council.
Yeah, I need an authorizing resolution on that
Authorize that.
in the
To
next meeting.
pursue for the grant?
Yeah.
What's the matching, 5 or 10?
Well, it's a 20%, I'm not sure, we have to provide the other 80% of the project.
So it's 20%.
So the grant would be up to 20%,
So we be paying 8%.
and we have to provide 80%. If, they don't really call it a match, they just come in at 20%,
Oh.
up to.
And it doesn't mean the city has to provide the 80%, it just means we have to have other funding sources.
Okay.
Right.
So do we need to move that up to
That-
council?
That will need to.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
moved.
So that would be sub topic A to 2A. We'll move that up to full council for resolution. Topic F, I guess, Greg, before you go into your explanation of this, I was just looking at this and I was curious of why we were looking at it, because I read this. And isn't it kind of assumed that the mayor would definitely pledge the city saying, yes, absolutely, as a representative of the municipality, we would want NICOM to do more, to get more? So I'm trying to understand why we're,
Yeah.
at the finance committee, looking at this resolution.
Yeah, the mayor's indicated he already has indicated support. You know, Ginny and I talked about it, and I don't think it would be bad. It certainly could help for there to be a resolution from the council support for this. I don't think it's necessary, like required. The mayor can go ahead and pledge that support. I think he has, but it certainly would be a big difference. I know Ginny want to talk about what AIM funding is exactly and how this would impact the city's budget.
As you know, the city receives state revenue sharing. Our formula has not changed in decades. This is the first opportunity that has come along in decades for us to have a say in what the state is going to do with their AIM formula in providing more state revenue sharing to the different municipalities. What this resolution shows is that the governing body for the city of Oneonta supports the governor's goal of increasing the annual formulas to the local municipalities. I'm hoping that every municipality in New York State submits this resolution to the governor's office. I signed the letter, the mayor signed the letter, showing that, yes, we want to do this. But the governing body represents the city of Oneonta. The city is a member of NORCOM, not just one individual, but the entire city. And what this will do is it will show when we file this resolution, the clerk will file the resolution with the state saying that the city of Oneonta governing body, it represents and it supports this goal. It's symbolic and it shows the governor can take these resolutions from all the different municipalities through the state and take it to their legislators and say, look, this is how many people or how many governments need this money. And like I said, I'm hoping that every municipality in New York State sends this resolution to the governor's office.
But Ginny, didn't you just get done saying that you just signed it and you sent it on? So
No,
you're
I said-
representing
no,
the
I
city of
said-
Oneonta
I
along
s-
with the
yeah,
mayor did it?
That was just a letter. That was
Right.
just, it was, so it's just going to be a letter, but this will actually be a supporting resolution. That shows that the whole body is, it's symbolic and it just shows the political opinion of the different governments. But the letter is one thing, that had to be signed by March 1st. But now this is a resolution. If the council chooses not to do it, you know, you can make that decision, but in my opinion, I think it's an opportunity that we should historically show the Albany that we support.
I'll put it back to the committee. Do you guys want to move forward on it? Do you see a need for it?
I'm fine with it.
I'd agree.
Sure. We'll move up to full council then. It's in concert with what you and the mayor have already done representing, and I'm assuming Grady, you must sign something also?
I don't.
You know, so then you and the mayor have already signed something back at the beginning of the month, and you're saying that this document is just in concert with what your efforts already.
Yeah, and then this resolution will actually get submitted to the governor's office.
Topic
Could I
G.
follow, Len, I'm sorry, could I follow up on the ESD grant quick? I just looked up the match for that grant. So the city would have to provide 10% of the total project cost in the form of equity contributed to the project. So if we're using any, like our funds for the sale of these, that
10%.
So we're good, but I just want to make sure I clarified that.
We're definitely going to be all in more than 10%.
Yes.
There's no way around it.
No.
I don't know of too many developers that want to come in and spend $1 million for that lot either. I don't think we're to that stage.
That's why the 431 sounds much better.
Man.
I am.
So I'm actually with Katie on this. I really want to restrain from using the ARPA funds, the 713 for this project. So basically that gives us 780, about 788, give or take. So we need to come up with $1 million. Make it flat split.
I wouldn't be opposed to spending the ARPA money, I just wanted to have the conversation about, you know,
Well,
everything. If we
I think the ARPA funds were designed for something other than this, to create a blank slate. But
That's fair.
Discussions that you pointed out, we don't have. We're on to topic G, the community development loan subordination request. And we get 1 or 2 of these a year, I believe.
Yeah, we have a recipient who received a community development first-time homeowners loan. They want to refinance their current mortgages that they hold. We need council approval to allow subordination of our mortgages after their refinancing. So we're still in the number 2 position from his original mortgage, so now we're just going to subordinate it to his refinancing mortgage.
Does anybody have an objection allowing a homeowner to refinance before the rates go too high. So we go.
Get it done quick.
Get it done quick. Topic H.
Okay, we had gone out to bid for laboratory testing for the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. The contract was awarded. However, the recipient of the contract is not fulfilling the terms of the contract. And Chris and the wastewater treatment plant director and the water plant director would like to cancel that contract and give it to the second bidder. The second, John Janets has contacted the second bidder, and they will hold to their bid that they provided for the original bid. So we would like to cancel the current contract and re-award it to the second bidder.
Any concerns?
Nothing.
Is that up to full council? Topic I.
This is the Maskey Field contract. Okay. Making sure I had messed up. So the Outlaws, their contract actually was up at the end of 2020, I believe, because we had no baseball going on. We hadn't renewed. We did end up having some baseball played in 2021, although Gary Lang, or the Outlaws, wasn't able to fully utilize the field like he normally would. They did have an Outlaw season, but he didn't have any other users there, so that impacted his revenues. We've proposed a new contract for the lease of the field and associated facilities for an additional 5 years. We can't really discuss the specific terms of that. It's contract and negotiation unless we want to go into executive session. But we hope, based on our conversations with Gary Lane this week, depending on how those go, we'd like to bring that contract forward to council for approval on Tuesday. Obviously, if we're able to tentatively agree.
You don't have a final.
So we don't have a final contract right now. We have our final draft we presented to Gary. He's to review. I believe he emailed back today, but I haven't had a chance to review that with Jimmy yet. We're anticipating some sort of tentative agreement for the council meeting on Tuesday. So I'll give you a heads up.
Any objections?
No?
So this is gonna go in the discussion section of the council meeting?
They could.
I think it would be
I
helpful
probably
for us
should,
to see
yeah.
the contracts, you know, it's hard for us to say anything about
Yeah.
it, we don't know what we're talking about.
Right. This was just following the process.
Gotcha.
So as to not hold it up, we went in the second meeting in April, games start in May, or practice starts, I think, the first part of May or in April.
Yeah,
We'd like to-
that was my question. I wanted to know why we were looking at this without having the contract in front of us.
Yeah, just giving you a heads up that we're talking about it, and hope to have that contract to you before council to discuss. So I'll make notes, make sure that's discussion.
And then if we discuss it at the council, it has to go to executive session?
Things we're going to talk about specifics.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
So you definitely don't want to wait and bring it back in 2 weeks? Because if you think the timetable,
We'd rather have a contract in place before this year's season starts, that's the goal.
When's
I
this
think we're going
season
to
start?
be the third week of April. So you would have it, you'd have it by finance the first week. Council's going to be with us 5th, council's 5th. So we will meet,
We could bring it back and discuss it in executive session here at the next finance meeting if you prefer. We just didn't want to hold up unnecessarily what is not a formality, but a process that, you know, we're going to have a contract one way or the other. We didn't want to hold it up, but if you're comfortable waiting, Jenny, unless you have another thought.
No, I do think that when you and I meet with Gary, during this week, we will basically have the final draft for your review ready for Tuesday night. We can get that to you, and we can go in executive Tuesday, on April 5th, and discuss the contract then. But if you want to wait another finance committee, we could also do that.
committee, you want to wait, or do you want the whole council to chime in?
I'm fine with Tuesday.
You have no idea whether you want the whole council to chime in or you want the finance committee to chime in?
No, I don't know.
Because I could go back 45 minutes.
I don't know if I'm gonna hold it. That's what I'm saying. Probably just put it on for the whole council and then discuss, and let us all discuss it.
Okay. Committee has spoken.
Can I ask a process question? Would it be like inappropriate to share with us the draft contract? Not for this time, but just thinking about, obviously there's a desire for the committee to see the contract, so I know that the timing didn't match up, but like in the future, if there's something like that, would it be appropriate for us to see the draft contract so we could at least have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, we typically, the way Jeannie's been doing this longer than I have as far as negotiating these contracts, but, you know, we'll get to the point where we have something that works for the city's operations and get to some sort of tentative understanding. So